From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas grows more intense in southern Gaza. This despite international pressure for an immediate ceasefire. Ukraine's Air Force chief says Russia launched 13 Iranian-made drones, 10 of which were down in the Kharkiv, Sumy, and Kyiv regions. A New York judge places former U.S. President Donald Trump under a gag order ahead of his criminal hush money trial beginning April 15th. In Budapest, thousands protest against the Hungarian prime minister after an insider released a tape allegedly implicating Orban's aide in a corruption case. Thailand's parliament passes a same-sex marriage bill, paving the way for the kingdom to become the first Southeast Asian nation to recognize LGBTQ marriage equality. We begin with updates on the Baltimore bridge collapse. Divers will be returning to the water surrounding the twisted ruins of the bridge that came crashing down in Baltimore after a cargo ship rammed into it on Tuesday. The search operation, which was suspended on Tuesday, will resume as a recovery operation of 6 workers now presumed dead. All 6 workers were members of a nighttime construction crew who were repairing potholes on the Francis Scott Key Bridge when the cargo ship struck.
I said we have to cease operations. We can't start again until we can assure the safety of those divers and the rescue personnel that are going to participate in this. If we look at how challenging it is at a simple motor vehicle crash to extract an individual, I'm sure we can all imagine how much harder it is to do it in inclement weather, when it's cold, under the water, with very limited to no visibility. But we're going to do everything in our power to help these families find closure.
Workers pulled 2 other workers from the water alive, and one of them was hospitalized in critical condition. Now, the search was suspended on Tuesday as authorities said the temperatures and currents made it difficult for divers to continue working underwater. However, boats continued patrolling overnight.
Responders, I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of your courage. I'm in awe of your strength. I'm in awe of everything you do for each and every one of us. You saw a crisis and you said, what can I do to help? And our response teams are doing everything in our power to rescue and recover the victims of this collapse, literally as we speak. People who, as we speak, are out there are divers, are air assets. People who right now are working to save lives and are doing it because the state asked. I think, well, the investigation is still going on to find out exactly how many people in what situation. But the thing that we do know is that many of the vehicles were stopped before they got onto the bridge, which saved lives in a very, very heroic way.
And to recap this horrible tragedy, shortly after 1 a.m. Eastern Time, a container ship named Dali, a Singapore flag ship, was sailing down the Patapsco River on its way to Sri Lanka. And at 1:24 a.m., it suffered a total power failure and all of its lights went out. 3 minutes later, at 1:27 a.m., the container ship appeared to hit a main concrete pier, which is part of the structural foundation of the bridge. Now, the bridge crumbled into the icy water, sending vehicles and people into the river. Video footage shows the vessel slamming into the bridge in total darkness. Now, experts say the design of the bridge contributed to its collapse.
It was a very large container ship, and so given the fact that it impacted that pier just apparently from the videos head on, I'm not surprised. The bridge is designed to span a certain distance. It relies on those supports. If one of those supports is gone, of course, bridges are constructed with factors of safety, but not that kind of factor of safety. It seems to me that the bridge itself, the superstructure, was not the issue. The issue was that it wasn't, the pier itself wasn't designed to resist that large of an impact load from the vessel.
However, a much bigger disaster was averted in Baltimore, and that's because the ship reported a power failure before impact, which enabled officials to stop traffic on the bridge before its actual collapse. Now, the 948-foot vessel experienced a momentary loss of propulsion, and reports say it dropped anchor as part of its emergency procedure before impact. U.S. President Joe Biden said the Coast Guard responded quickly to the Mayday call and commended the prompt action of Maryland transportation officials. He also promised to visit Baltimore as soon as possible.
The bridge collapsed, sending several people and vehicles into the water, into the river, and multiple U.S. Coast Guard units, which are stationed very nearby, thank God, were immediately deployed along with local emergency personnel. And the Coast Guard is leading the response to the port, where representatives from the Federal Highway Administration, the FBI, the Department of Transportation, the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as Maryland officials and Baltimore Police and Fire, are all working together to coordinate an emergency response. And to the people of Baltimore, who want to say, we're with you. We're going to stay with you as long as it takes. And like the governor said, you're Maryland tough, you're Baltimore strong, and we're going to get through this together. And I promise we're not leaving. It's my intention that federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge. And I expect the Congress to support my effort.
Now, the ship that caused the collapse was also involved in an accident in the port of Antwerp in Belgium back in 2016. Antwerp port authorities said that the container ship Dali hit a quay as it tried to exit the North Sea container terminal. An inspection that same year found that the container to have structural issues. Now, port authorities said the ship had remained at the dock for repairs after the incident. However, Singapore's port authority says that the ship passed 2 overseas inspections just last year. In fact, it added that a faulty monitor gauge for the fuel pressure was in fact rectified in June. Now, while an investigation into the disaster is currently underway, federal investigators are waiting for recordings from the vessel, which they say could be critical to help determine what actually happened. The disaster has forced an indefinite closure of the port of Baltimore, and it may be some time before one of the busiest commercial hubs on the U.S. eastern seaboard can in fact reopen. As tensions continue to simmer between Israel and the United States, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin hosted his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant in Washington. The two top officials presented a sense of business as usual during the 90-minute meeting, which comes as ties between President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu descend to their lowest point in years. Secretary Austin told Gallant that civilian casualties in Gaza are too high.
Our goal is to make Israel and the region safer and more secure. And as I have consistently said, protecting Palestinian civilians from harm is both a moral necessity and a strategic imperative. In Gaza today, the number of civilian casualties is far too high, and the amount of humanitarian aid is far too low. Gaza is suffering a humanitarian catastrophe, and the situation is getting even worse. And we need immediate increases in assistance to avert famine, And our work to open a temporary humanitarian corridor by sea will help, but the key is still expanding aid deliveries by land. So, Mr. Minister, I look forward to discussing how we can dramatically and urgently ease the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Now, Secretary Austin also suggested alternatives to a major Israeli offensive planned in Rafah. Washington now has pressed Israel to ensure that any military operation in Rafah unfolds in phases to protect civilians and secure the delivery of aid. The defense secretary said that it was imperative to protect Palestinian civilians in the war.
The safety of the 1.5 million Palestinian civilians in Rafah is also a top priority for the United States. Now, we continue to share the goal of seeing Hamas defeated. So we'll discuss alternative approaches to target Hamas elements, and we must also plan for Israel's security after this conflict ends. And that includes working in renewed cooperation with the Palestinian Authority and our regional partners to stabilize Gaza and to move toward a two-state solution.
Now, U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin said that the United States will continue to stand up for Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with the law of armed conflict and humanitarian law. He also said that the security bond between Israel and the United States was unshakable.
Now, it's been nearly 6 months since the Hamas atrocities of October 7th, the worst day in Israel's history. No country should endure such terror, and no country would tolerate such danger. So President Biden has been clear. Israel has a right to defend itself like any other state. So we're working with Israel to ensure that an outrage like October 7 can never happen again. And the United States will not rest until all the hostages are home. Our security bond is unshakable. The United States is Israel's closest friend, and that won't change. And so I look forward to a good discussion today. And again, thanks for being here, Mr. Minister.
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said he discussed important cooperation between Israeli and U.S. defense establishments to ensure Israel's qualitative military edge in the region. He also emphasized the ongoing threats to Israel.
Over the past 6 months, we have been fighting a war against a brutal terror organization, Hamas, which is the ISIS of Gaza. We also face attacks from 7 different fronts, all led by Iran. While I sit here in the Pentagon, Hamas leader Hania is meeting with Iranian leadership. The picture is clear. Who is where? The destruction of Hamas organization and bringing back the Israeli hostages back home. The negotiation on the hostages issue and Hamas positions require us to join hands in our military and diplomatic efforts and to increase pressure on Hamas.
The Israeli defense minister also met with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and CIA Director William Burns, who recently returned from talks in Doha. And on Monday, he also met with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Now, the series of meetings came a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu abruptly canceled a high-level delegation visit to Washington this week. Netanyahu is reportedly furious over the most recent UN Security Council vote calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. In that vote, the United States abstained, deciding not to use its veto, and the resolution was passed. Israel says it cannot defeat Hamas without going into Rafah, where it says the group has 4 battalions composed of thousands of fighters. Netanyahu has vowed to press ahead with Israel's offensive, but the United States has repeatedly warned Israel against a ground invasion in Rafah. In fact, Washington continues to push for a more precise operation. And shifting focus to Russia now, where President Putin continues to shift the blame from the Moscow concert hall attack onto Ukraine and the West, despite the Islamic State claiming responsibility for the massacre. The head of Russia's most powerful security agency, the FSB, has said that he believed Ukraine, along with the United States and Britain, were involved in the attack that killed at least 139 people. However, the Russian head of Federal Security Service did not offer any evidence.
We believe that the action was prepared by both the Islamist radicals themselves and was facilitated by Western special services. As for the Ukrainian intelligence services, they are directly involved in that. I think that it is true. Generally, we think that they are involved. Depending on how the investigation goes, we will receive the corresponding facts. Now, all I can say is that the preliminary information that we have received points at the involvement of that side in preparing that action. Let's say they were getting ready for it because the suspects were leaving for Ukraine. Those are the facts we have received after working with the detained suspects.
His allegations followed similar ones made earlier by President Vladimir Putin, who actually linked the attack to Ukraine, even as he acknowledged that the suspects were radical Islamists. In fact, in a televised address, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the attackers had tried to flee to Ukraine. Now, Kiev has repeatedly denied any link with Friday's attack and dismissed Russia's accusations as outright lies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called Putin's claims both sick and cynical. He also said that Russia was making such claims to drum up fervor as its forces continue to fight in Ukraine. Now, Britain has said Moscow's claims were utter nonsense. And as for the United States, it was Washington, in fact, that had warned Moscow of an imminent attack 15 days earlier. Now, Belarusian president and a close Putin ally, Alexander Lukashenko, has also cast doubt on the Russian narrative. In fact, he suggested that the attackers first tried to cross into Belarus and not Ukraine. On Friday, 4 armed men burst into the Crocus City Hall and opened fire. 139 people were killed and another 22 remain in serious condition. 4 suspects accused of carrying out the massacre appeared in court with signs of severe beatings and have been sent to pre-trial custody. They've been charged with terrorism, while 4 other suspects have also been accused of aiding the suspected terrorists. Moving to Africa now, the Kenyan government has started handing over the remains of about 400 cult members who were found dead, and the police discovered the bodies, which were buried together in a mass grave. A self-proclaimed spiritualist by the name of Paul Mackenzie has been charged with their murders. Now, according to the testimony of one of the surviving victims, he convinced them to starve themselves and their children to death to meet Jesus. Our next report explains.
A former taxi driver, a cult leader, and now a mass murderer. This is Paul Mackenzie, the man behind one of the worst cult-related tragedies in recent history. The head of the cult, the Good News International Ministries, has been charged with terrorism, manslaughter, and murder of over 400 people. The Kenyan government has begun handing over bodies of 429 members of this cult. The exhumed bodies have shown signs of starvation and strangulation. The recovery process began in 2023, but a year on, only 35 bodies have been conclusively identified.
It has been a very tough journey from last year up to now, a very tough one. Fortunately, I'm happy that I've got the loved ones. Now we are preparing to go and bury so that now we can start another journey of forgetting about this.
These bodies were found buried in mass graves in Malindi's Shakahola forest. Mackenzie ran his cult in this vast rural area in coastal Kenya. Testimonies of survivors reflect the horrors of this cult. Paul Mackenzie, the self-declared Godman, convinced people through his sermons that he could communicate with God. He said, to meet Jesus, they must starve themselves and their children to death. He prohibited the members of this cult from attending schools or visiting hospitals, branding these institutions as satanic. He also issued sermons asking the members to destroy all government-issued identification cards. In April last year, a man from Nairobi approached the police after his wife and daughter, who left home to join Mackenzie's cult, did not return. This triggered a massive probe. What was discovered next left the entire country shocked. Upon reaching the forested area, the police found emaciated people and shallow graves. Each grave contained the bodies of several people buried together, with signs of starvation, strangulation, suffocation, and injuries sustained from blunt objects. According to reports, some bodies were even missing internal organs. In February, a court charged Mackenzie with torturing and murdering 191 children. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges. The trial is set to begin on April 23rd. Mackenzie is already serving 1-year prison sentence. He was convicted of producing films and operating a studio without a license. The Kenyan Human Rights Commission is blaming the police for the Shakahola Forest massacre, accusing them of gross abdication of duty and negligence. They say the police failed to act on credible reports when people came to them.
It is 1 year later, we have still only 33 bodies identified. There are 390 plus bodies yet to be identified positively. Going at this rate, we are going to be here for 10 years trying to identify the 390 plus bodies. I think the government must intentionally commit resources towards this process so that we are able to give closure to families.
Kenya, a devout, largely Christian nation, has seen a surge in unscrupulous churches and cults. These organizations are often linked to criminal activities. Now the government is struggling to tighten control over such fringe groups. Outraged Kenyans have been asking how the authorities failed to notice any sign of the mass deaths earlier. There have also been several questions on how Mackenzie, a father of 7, managed to evade the law despite a history of extremism. However, for now, they all remain unanswered.
And finally, in a world where health trends and dietary supplements dominate headlines, recent developments in Japan have sparked widespread concern. A cholesterol-lowering pill in Japan has been linked with the death of at least 2 people and the hospitalization of at least an additional 100 more. Amidst the hustle and bustle of modern-day life, where maintaining optimal health is a constant struggle, the allure of quick-fix solutions has led many to turn to dietary supplements. But sometimes the cost of staying thin can turn out to be a price too high to pay. Our next report offers details.
In today's fast-paced world, maintaining health is increasingly challenging. This is exacerbated due to sedentary lifestyle, food choices, and work schedules. Thus, many individuals are turning to dietary supplements as potential solutions. These supplements, ranging from calcium to fish oil to vitamin D pills, are often touted as game changers for human health. However, not everyone requires a daily supplement regimen, as evidenced by the recent alarming incidents in Japan involving cholesterol-lowering pills. Japan recently issued a national recall of certain dietary supplements, amid concerns about their potential link to fatalities and hospitalizations. So far, 2 people have died and at least 100 have been taken to the hospital. Reports surfaced of kidney-related medical problems, with affected consumers complaining of changes in urine color, limb swelling, and fatigue. This has led to a massive probe. The authorities are examining hundreds of products that claim to have health benefits. Initial investigations revealed that the culprit behind the health crisis might be rice. It is a specific kind of rice called the red yeast rice, which is also known as benikoji in Japanese. The rice is first fermented and then used in these supplements. Japan's Kobayashi Pharmaceutical is also among one of the brands that has recalled its products. The Osaka-based drug maker stated that out of the 2 people who have died, 1 person regularly purchased benikoji for 3 years and then died of a kidney disease. The company is now investigating its product's connection with the death. They stated that as per their initial analysis, the products might contain ingredients that they had not intended to include. The company so far has reportedly sold over 1 million packets. Concerns over toxins like citrinine, which can affect kidneys, have also been raised. The company denies finding any such substance in its products. The red yeast rice is also used as a traditional color dye for food products. A beverage maker called Takara Shuzo Co. also recalled its sparkling sake product. They said that their products are made with beni koji provided by Kobayashi. The issue is not confined to Japan alone. Kobayashi stated that its red rice was being supplied to 50 farms in China and 2 in Taiwan. The product's circulation was then stopped in Taiwan. China too stepped in immediately and stopped the sale in the country. This health crisis in Japan serves as an important reminder to people. Exercising caution and seeking professional advice is crucial before incorporating supplements into daily routines, because these seemingly innocuous pills may carry unforeseen risks.
That's all we have time for today. We certainly thank you for taking time out to be with us. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.